I've said this before. I really, really love local newspapers. We've covered a lot of stories over the years. We've been doing this from local newspapers, and very often they are getting the news or getting the headlines that in a couple of weeks or even a couple of months do eventually make it to the national headlines. Um, so it is very, very important that pay attention to your local newspapers. And I've said this before: support your local newspapers. They are so, so important, so, so important. They really, really are. They're very often the only thing that is reporting certainly on what is happening on your local council. They're giving you local news, and once it's gone, it's gone. There are many, many, towns and throughout the UK that used to have a local newspaper that don't anymore, and it is a really vital piece, not only for local democracy, but just informing people what is going on in their town. And today, like I say, we're going to go over to the Star, which is a sort of a Sheffield regional sort of local newspaper covering what has been going on the cost of living crisis. I think you're going to see a lot, especially local newspapers, covering just what is really going on with the cost of living crisis right on their doorstep, because that is the news. And unfortunately, today we are having, or we are seeing people in Rotherham queue up outside a pawnbroker. And as we'll get into the story later, just last week there were reported to be at least 200 people queuing up to get their council tax rebate money from this. So I've talked about it before. This isn't going to be good for a whole lot of people, the cost of living crisis. And we are starting to see the consequences of the cost of living crisis, and to have to turn, for people who are in such desperate need, to turn to pawnbrokers to be able to cash their rebate checks when they are so desperately need that money. You can already see where this is going. It isn't going to end well. But we'll get into what the Star had to report here, and we'll talk about this more afterwards. So, of course, before we do jump into it, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one after link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, there is the YouTube subscription button, where if you click it, you will get all sorts of little bells and whistles. So, on we go to the Star. So, with the title of Council Tax Rebate. Queues outside the pawnbroker shops in Rotherham as hard-up people cash in 150 rebate checks. So, hard-up residents struggling with the cost of living crisis have been queuing up outside pawnbroker shops in South Yorkshire to cash their £150 council rebate checks. They are turning to pawnbrokers because they cannot afford to wait for the money if there are delays in cashing their checks at the bank. Yesterday, one pawnbroker in Rotherham had to turn away customers because the demand was so high they ran out of money. I mean, that's pretty shocking in itself, that there's that much demand for for this service that is happening. And of course, remember, this is a pawnbroker, so they're making change off this as well, which we're going to get into just in a bit. You'll see here. So anyway, it continues. People have been queuing outside the cash shop in Rotherham town centre over recent days. The store charges a 7.9% commission, pardon me, and a £2.99 handling fee, leaving those cashing in the £150 rebate check with now around £135. So as you can see, they are so desperate to get the cash in their pocket, they are going to these places, which are then, again, charging their commissions and the handling fees. And instead of getting that £150, they're now getting £135. So more than 50 people were seen queuing outside the cash shop on Wednesday after 200 people were reported there on the previous day. But yesterday, staff had to tell customers to come back later if they wanted to cash a check, as they had no money left. After other pawn shops in town centre erected signs saying, "We do not cash checks." The rebate checks are being dished out by the local authorities to help with the cost of living crisis. For those who do not pay their council tax through direct debit, a check is instead issued. Rotherham Council is advising the using of bank, post office, or even the local authority to avoid fees. So again, if you do see this, do go use one of those services. Don't use a pawnbroker because at the end of the day, instead of £150, you may find yourself with a lot less money because, like I say, they will, take a service charge from that. But some of those waiting in line yesterday said that they couldn't afford to wait days for their checks to clear through their bank. Terry Sykes of 34 from Maltby went down to the shop to cash the check and gave up when she saw the queue. She said, "They've sent it to my partner, even though I'm the one who does all the finances and he doesn't have a bank account. We're in the middle of moving house, so I haven't got the time to queue. It's a mess." Carol Stubbs, 32 from Dinnington, queued up outside Ramsden's pawnbrokers. She said, "I've been down 3 times now. Each time the queue is a mile long. I'm with Monzo, so there isn't a in-person bank. You have to send it off, and it takes weeks." Aaron Parker, 39, told a local radio station about his bank had shut its local branch, so that he would have to walk at least 7 miles to Sheffield to cash it in his nearest bank. He said he was desperate for cash as he had no gas or electricity and had been reduced to rummaging through bins for food. Aaron said that the money from his council tax rebate would allow him to pay for some bills and at least buy back his phone from cash converters, which he had previously sold for £35. He said, "I've got £134, so I lost £16, but that money will get me through to today." The council tax rebate provides a payment of at least £150 to households living in council tax bands A to D. Local councils are indeed responsible for determining who is eligible and making those payments, but they are starting to be handed out in April of 2022 and will need to be paid back. And of course, I will not need to be paid back. Sorry. So yeah, of course, this I think is a sign of worse things to come. I really do. The fact that people are having to turn to sort of pawnbrokers to cash these checks. Of course, this has been long something that's been warned about banks closing local branches, these small branches that might only have like 3 or 4 people, but provide such an important, access to a community. But this is the way that that things are going, unfortunately. And it's difficult to say what could happen. It's difficult to say, the consequences of this. Well, we had a situation in Barnsley, I think it was a couple of years ago, where one pawnbroker, or at least a payday loan provider, there was a riot outside on the street. And I don't say, I don't want that to happen, but that was happened a few years ago because, of course, their system, they had a system failure and they couldn't operate. It ended up in a riot. But you think of the potential consequences, what could happen here, and what people have been said there, and the fact that people have been left in such bad positions by the government because they are just refusing to just step in and help people who really desperately need help. It's just beyond bad governance. It's dereliction of duty. It really, really is. But yeah, it's difficult to say how we get out of this, of course. One option, of course, is getting rid of the Tories, but of course, we're still at least 2 years away from that. So, some people in some cases can't hang on that long. And of course, even if you do get a new government in that starts to, to tackle the cost of living crisis, it's the time it takes to pass bills, what majority they have in Parliament. It's going to be longer than that to help these people who are in dire situations. So we can only hope that the dire predictions of doom and gloom really do not come true. But I've said before, I think this year is going to be very particularly hard for a whole lot of people. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please don't remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.